I'd like to acknowledge that this episode of the Teach New South Wales podcast was recorded on the homelands of the Darug people. I'd like to pay respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today. Welcome to the Teach New South Wales podcast, a podcast by teachers for teachers. Hi everybody, welcome back to the Teach New South Wales podcast. It's Siobhan, your co-host, joined by Shannon.
Hello.
We're very lucky today to have John joining us today as a guest on the couch.
Hello.
Welcome, John, to the Teach New South Wales podcast. John is a special and inclusive education assistant principal in a New South Wales public school on the lands of the Gadigal people. John joins us today to speak about what inclusion truly means and share tried and tested strategies for the special and inclusive education classroom and beyond. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. Let's dive right in. We like to warm our guests up, we always say. This is an interesting question I have for you, so get ready. If you could go to dinner with any influential person, dead or alive, who would it be? And it can be someone fictional.
Ooh. Probably Walt Disney, actually.
Yeah,
It
great.
actually
That's a good one.
wasn't going to be my first answer, I don't think, but just thinking about it, I think just the impact that what he created and the longevity of Disney
Yeah.
is just really powerful because it does really encourage everyone, doesn't matter how old you are,
Yeah.
to think imaginatively, think outside the box, and have fun with your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's cool. Yeah. Damn, that's a good one. I might have to take that.
That's
Go for
right.
it. More than welcome.
Tell me, do you have a hobby or special interest going at the moment, or something that you're looking to maybe take up?
I mean, a sporting hobby that I have is soccer. So this is
nice.
actually my 30th year
Whoa.
this season
Woo-woo.
playing soccer.
Have you been injury free?
I was about to say the same thing. We're so concerned. Did you agree?
Tell me about the injuries.
Yes and no. I do remember one injury that I had back in the teens era, where I had to play the goalie, which I absolutely despise. And the offense were running towards me. I was running backwards, thinking that I was making the right choice to just run backwards, tripped, and then sillily put reflex, put the hand back first.
No.
And I don't think I broke it from memory, but was very, very close to being a break. But thankfully got away with just a very bad fracture.
Oh my goodness.
But that's probably the worst injury that I've had playing
That's a
soccer.
pretty good run.
Thankfully.
Yeah, great run.
Touch wood.
Yeah. And you don't like being goalie, but what's your preferred?
My
on the field?
preferred place, my preferred place would be centre back or sweeper.
Nice.
Are my kind of two favorite, or anywhere in the defence, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Okay, great. I wouldn't have, you don't know what their hobbies are. I love hearing about people's hobbies. What's your hobby, Siobhan?
I'm going to go with something that I want to get into.
Okay, yeah.
Which is Reformer Pilates. I feel I need to join into the Reformer Pilates revolution. I've already purchased the grip socks.
Yep.
Just yet to get the membership and actually go to the Reformer
Well, you've got
Pilates.
the socks. You're halfway there.
But I've got the socks, 4 pairs, different colours, nice stripe, very aesthetic. So I'm ready to go. I just need to sign up. So
Socks are the first step.
correct. I'm halfway.
Absolutely.
I'm halfway there. So next time you see me on the couch, I might have gone to Reformer Pilates.
She's
class.
2 socks closer to success.
Exactly right. And I'm very proud of it. What about you, Shannon? Hobbies, special
Yes, I've recently taken up social netball, we'll call it.
Hey.
Emphasis on the social. I do cop a lot of teasing that I am quite a bit perhaps too social with the other team.
You put the social in social.
I
netball.
really like to get to know my comrades on the field. Whoever I'm marking, we're really getting to know each other. So often I do get most fun player, and I put that down to my networking.
Hey.
You never know who you're going to meet.
That's a skill.
Any
That's a
opportunity is a networking opportunity, even on the netball court.
That's a quote to live by.
There you go.
skill. Absolutely.
We love it.
So that's my newfound hobby. But I was never really a netballer at school, so it's kind of like a new thing in my adult life, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, no,
It's
cool.
pretty fun. Our next one that we have, biggest teacher achievement either last term or teacher goal looking forward into next term?
My biggest achievement, I think, would be being awarded the Network Award for Executive
Aw,
in our network at the end of
congratulations.
last year. I think not that you do the job for the accolades or the awards or the certificates or the plaques, but it's just really nice, a really nice, genuine feeling that what you're doing is having an impact both in the classroom as well as with your colleagues. I think that made it really, really special to be acknowledged by my peers.
Well, it's feeling value, right?
Yeah.
You're being recognized, I suppose.
I
Yes,
believe
that
you. I believe you also get a beautiful copy of your citation as well. From
I
the
did,
event.
which
is
some of
very special.
the statements that
Yeah.
were put in there by my boss
Yeah.
were really, really nice, and
Yeah.
you could really see the genuine nature behind the statements that she was making, which again makes you reflect on whether you're purposely doing things in the job for others to see or like picture it. It's nice to then see it in writing that people do value and see what you're doing, whether it is under the radar or above the radar kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think moving forward, a biggest goal would be really supporting students in my classroom to continue to achieve their best, and also support my colleagues in building a really positive and fluid collaborative classroom flow for all students across the school, whether they're in a specialist setting of a support unit or whether they're in mainstream receiving funding, having that beautiful flow between classes and supporting kids to achieve and learn to the best that they can is always my goal.
Excellent. I love it. You've got a clear vision and you're ready to execute. So power to you.
Here we go.
John means business.
Here we
Love
go.
Well, let's talk a bit more about you and your journey into teaching, because inclusive education was something that you jumped into straight from high school. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you've never really strayed from that. So I'd be interested to hear where did that initial spark come from? Why teaching and why inclusive education specifically?
Cool. I think my earliest memory back in primary school myself, I can just always remember when anyone said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" My statement and response would always be a school teacher. I've just always wanted to be one. I don't know why. No one in my immediate family is a teacher.
Yeah.
But I just think I've always just had that genuine, caring, nurturing nature about myself, that I've always looked after others, wanted to see the best in other people. So, just always have wanted to be one. So going through school, made sure I picked my HSC subjects that would at least get me into a teaching degree. Thankfully, got through. And then got to into the degree, started the course straight from uni, straight from high school, went straight into university. And then during university, I ended up studying early childhood as my undergrad and postgrad. And then within that course, after undertaking a couple of special ed subjects, just really sparked a bit of an interest. Not that I thought that would be where I was headed when I got into the classroom. And then for my final practicum, I remember kind of wanting to challenge myself. And so I ended up liaising with the school that I'd participate in some volunteer hours for as part of one of the courses. And it actually was the school that my brother went to. So my brother has a severe disability. And so I ended up connecting with the teachers there and said, would I be allowed to do my practicum here? They were like, absolutely.
Of course, come on in.
And then, ended up completing that, absolutely loving it. Was on a stage 2-3 class, I think, from memory, and had such a great time. Just all the fun experiences, thinking outside the box of how to connect those students to the content is kind of my little spark and fire that gets me kind of really excited about being in the classroom. And then I ended up still doing a double degree, so Bachelor of Teaching, then moved into the Bachelor of Education. So at the end of the third year, did my interview with the department, so I was able to start teaching during fourth year.
Went through the graduate recruitment process.
Yep, so did all of that fun fun, exciting journey.
Yeah.
And then
To become one of us.
Actually, I remember going out to Blacktown when it was used to be a Blacktown office, which, you know, when you think about that, to kind of think, you know, where the department has moved and where, you know, how that process has
we're virtual now.
changed and you know, morphed into the modern world. But yeah, so then in my 4th year, I actually did a study abroad. So I did a semester overseas, which I would highly recommend to anyone undertaking, you know, teaching. Go explore the world and see what education is like in other countries. I think that's really empowered me to see how awesome, you know, New South Wales Department of Ed really is across the globe, and how great it can be. So I came back, started teaching in my 4th year after that, and ended up picking up some substantial blocks at the school that I had done my practicum in. And then ended up working there full time for the first 3 years of my career.
Wow.
In an SSP. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's just how I got into it. And I haven't looked back.
Yeah, I love that. So you started working at an SSP, School for a Specific Purpose. And I also know from our previous conversations, you've worked in other contexts as well, like support units at a comprehensive school, etc. What was it like for you going through teaching in those different contexts, I suppose? Because every learning environment is different, but what was it like particularly for you across your journey?
I think for me, starting in the SSP really gave me a strong foundation of how to really genuinely and authentically adjust the curriculum to support students to learn where they're at and meet students where they're at. I think having a school where every teacher, every staff member is on the same page, wanting the same outcome for the students that are in our care, I think really built me up to have that strong foundation moving then into the support unit setting where, you know, depending on the school can be a little bit tricky for some teachers, knowing how to balance, you know, students with diverse, intricate needs with their mainstream peers and working out how to support them in those tricky situations sometimes. I think being in the, you know, SSP, the Schools for Specific Purposes first, built that real strong foundation to know how to best support some of those students that may have then presented some really tricky or confronting behaviours, to be able to support my colleagues in how to support those students when they're in their most need, as well as then helping encourage students to understand that difference is okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think it's really crucial you were mentioning other teachers before, potentially in that mainstream context. I think it's really important to flag that I think teachers need to feel empowered to step into those settings, and sometimes it might feel unfamiliar, but I'd sort of love to hear from you. What skills do you think, you know, teachers who have only been in mainstream settings can bring to those inclusive education settings that they might not think they're equipped with but would be useful in that context?
Cool question. I think it's the conversation that I have with my colleagues quite a lot. They always do the whole, how do you do it? And I turn to them and say, I don't know how you do it.
That's like listening to us, to be quite honest with you. How are you teaching those high school kids?
And I'm like,
no, thank you.
I'm all for it. Primary, like.
No, high school, no, thank you. But I think... it is that battle where I always say to them, give me a class of 5-6 students that have really intricate, diverse needs that you've really got to think outside the square to build their capacity to learn, versus a class of 30 students. No, thank you. But I think it is just that powerful thing where, you know, teachers, regardless of where they're at or where they're teaching, what grade, what level, what type of school, city, rural, it's just, I think what teachers need to understand themselves as well sometimes is that difference and challenge is okay as well, and that it's not a reflection on their ability to teach, but it's a reflection on how they can change or open their way of thinking to take the skills, knowledge and you know, talents they have themselves as an educator to then be able to implement that into any classroom they're in.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
amazing because the department offers retraining scholarships. So, as a secondary English teacher myself, if I wanted to retrain in inclusive education, you could do so through a paid department scholarship. So I think it's really important for our mainstream educators to hear that they actually do have the skills and talents, like you were saying, and there is the capacity to harness that and jump into the special and inclusive education setting as well.
Totally.
It's so important that we have more special and inclusive education teachers. So I think it's great to hear from somebody like you who has been involved in that for 15 years and can really speak to the testament of what is so valuable about these settings and the impact that you can make. So
No, totally. And I think moving from that as well, like absolutely, like the scholarships are phenomenal. And I always tell people, if you're interested,
Yeah.
apply, give it a go.
Yeah.
Why not? Or also just even if that's not where they feel their path might be taking them, look at doing some small
blocks,
blocks
casual days
in a school for specific purposes or in a support unit, just to really, I think, to break down that wall or barrier that they've put up themselves about, or special education, inclusive education, that's not for me. It's too confronting. That just to even come in and do that day or two or a block, I would suggest more than just a couple of days.
Yeah.
But,
definitely.
to give a
Just
good
get
chunk
feel
of
for it.
time to get a feel for what we do in a specialist setting isn't all that different to what's happening in a mainstream classroom.
Yeah.
It's just, we have a little bit of flexibility, I suppose, and a little bit of a greater scope to play around with what's happening at times to best suit the students, versus maybe sometimes what some teachers feel is that real strict, we have to keep to this schedule, we have to keep to this, we have to keep to that. I think, I enjoy that part of special education where you can have a bit of fun. You can throw your timetable out the window occasionally, and you're still meeting the curriculum, you're still meeting the content that's needing to be covered, but you're doing it in a fun way.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about working in a support unit at your current school and aligning, that sort of like almost like a mentorship of practice with your teachers who are in the mainstream setting that would also have your students come and visit them for certain subjects, for example. What does that look like for you, sort of sharing that knowledge across with one another at your school in particular?
Yep, cool. So at my current school, we have a structure that we've called collaborative classrooms, where it involves at the beginning of each year within the support unit, we like to form our classes around stage-based grades more so than just off their disability. Obviously, that is definitely taken into consideration and a lot of discussions around appropriateness and suitability. But what we do with that then is, with each class being attached to their mainstream stage. So those teachers would then have their release time and their planning time with their mainstream colleagues. And what that does is allows our mainstream colleagues to ask those questions that they might not have an opportunity to ask or understand or know where that expertise might come from, by having the teacher from the support unit attached to their team. Yeah. So in those, data sessions, in those planning sessions, in those reflection times, it's that opportunity for teacher within the support unit to say, hey, this works really well in my classroom. Let me talk you through it. It might work really well for some of your students, or vice versa, picking our mainstream colleagues' brains who may at times have a slightly deeper knowledge and understanding of the curriculum and where it's meant to be at that point in time. We can really pick their brains apart to be like, okay, well, this is where my student is. It might be, a couple of stages a little bit below, but how can I build their skills where they're at here to still match and meet those content outcomes for where the students are. Yeah. So I think that's really powerful. And I think what happens is then we have students that kind of ebb and flow between the classes. So we call our support unit their home class for students, and then their mainstream class is called their peer class. So the first thing I did when I got to the school was kind of change that language. So it kind of put a positive spin on, it wasn't kids from the support unit. So I think changing the language and pushing that out to the community as well, so that the community were aware of that language change within our context, I think was really powerful moving forward and helped shape those interactions in a much more positive, beneficial way for all students and staff. And so their mainstream teachers would also then be called their peer teachers. So each student in the support unit has 2 teachers each year, which is really, really nice.
Yeah.
And they can make that connection with a few more faces across the school, which, you know, helps them feel more involved and more connected to the community as well.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that at the beginning of each year, obviously in the planning and programming for our students, we look at where their skills are and what subjects they could be really successful in if they were with their peers. So building their capacity within a smaller group setting, so building those communication, social skills in a smaller context where they might feel a little bit safer and have, you know, greater time to have structured supports and learning for them in that setting, to then, you know, take those skills into their mainstream class where it could be 20, 30 students versus their 7 to 10. So I think that's really powerful. And then what we also do is have students from mainstream occasionally come into the support unit to support their learning. So if they're struggling, normally in the areas of literacy and numeracy is where we find our biggest gaps at times, that supporting the students that might be in mainstream on funding to help build their skills in a smaller setting as well. Yeah. Again, with discussions with parents, it's all, you know, through that continual reflection and reporting and consultation process that we then have students kind of ebbing and flowing between the 2 spaces, which is really nice based on where they're at, what they're able to achieve, and then with or without additional either student learning support, office assistance, or sometimes teacher assistance, depending on if, for example, what might happen with some students is that occasionally if my majority of my class are with their peers doing art, geography, sciences, and that classroom teacher doesn't really feel like they need my support, I can then go and support other students within my classroom in other classes to then help, you know, have, you know, co-teaching, which I think is also an awesome thing that allows that collaborative classroom opens up that space as well to build in that kind of availability of a bit of team teaching, a bit of, you know, collaborative teaching as well between colleagues, which I think is really nice. And I've really genuinely enjoyed those experiences to kind of bounce off my peers and see what you can kind of each can bring to a classroom situation.
It sounds like you've really fostered, like the school's fostered a, you know, a learning environment that not only empowers your students, even the small thing like changing the language, like is so powerful, but also it's really fostered an environment to empower your teachers as well. And particularly for like early career teachers, I would say, what an opportunity to be able to co-teach, for example, with someone like yourself who's got 15 years of experience. Like, I feel like that's something where they could really, like a sponge, upskill in different areas and build that confidence with someone alongside them, which is a really, really wonderful thing to be able to have access to.
No, absolutely. And I just said it's sort of that best of both worlds that, you know, we're learning off our colleagues, they're learning off us, as well as the students, that, you know, they can see that genuine connection between teachers as well, which I think is a powerful message and image for the students, staff, and the community.
Yeah. I was going to say that in my own schooling context, I had seen that original sort of students from their home class coming into their peer class and working together. But it was the point that you said for me that was kind of revolutionary just before was the fact that your peers who are learning in the mainstream setting come to the home class for that specialist support. So I think that's really unique and potentially something that our listeners can take back into their own contexts and classrooms, because that's something I hadn't really heard of before.
So giving that support to our mainstream colleagues as well, I think is really powerful when and where appropriate. It's not definitely like an absolute given, and it always is negotiated between the team and what's best for the students on any given day. And if they're not having a good day, then you reassess, you pivot and you go about some other activities in a much more calmer manner.
We take a deep breath, we pivot.
Jump in the ball pit and have a good time.
Absolutely. No, we understand.
I'd love to ask you, John, you know, around the topic of inclusion. You know, some people might be able to give a general definition of what inclusion is, but what does true inclusion mean to you? I'd love to hone in on that first.
Ooh, that is a hot topic. I think true inclusion to me is when a student is able to access learning, social connection, interaction in a space that best suits the needs and where they're at on their journey, whether it is personal or educational. I think that's where I genuinely find the real power in the different specialist settings that we as a department should celebrate.
Yeah.
I think it's really amazing that we can have, schools for specific, that's a tricky word, schools for specific purposes, that's a tongue twister,
It is.
that really is set up for those, what we would deem as our higher needs students, our pointier end students, that they're in a safe environment where every teacher is there to support them where they're at. And where they're at in their journey. And then again, with support units, supporting students in that space where it gives them that flow between mainstream learning and specialist learning that helps the students as well as the teachers, as well as then students that are on, funding support, allowing them with that little bit of tailored support, whether it's from a teacher or a SLSO, to be able to build their capacity that might, need just that little couple of reminders here and there, sensory support, that sort of thing. I think, to me, that's what true inclusion is.
Yeah.
It's building those structures and systems around the individuals to be able to get the best out of them and allow them to be the best that they can be.
Absolutely. So we've touched on your wonderful tenure, over 15 years experience across different contexts. How has working within different networks supported you not only as a teacher but as a leader, I suppose, in sharing your experiences? Because we sometimes, we're in just one school as a classroom teacher, for example, but we have these wonderful pockets of networks with our neighbouring schools that we get to be a part of in different variations, I suppose. What's that looked like for you, and how has it had an impact on you?
I think it's definitely a powerful tool that we have within our education system, that we can, change schools, change locations. And it's powerful in that each area that I've worked in has had very different needs for the community that they're supporting. I think that's what's really nice as an educator, to build that capacity as sort of like a global thinker, that, you're not just in that one little bubble. That I think, it's, powerful for an individual to build our own capacity as learners as well. And I think as a leader, working across different networks, from the Shire and then into the Inner West, just those very comparable needs and ecosystems, I suppose, for a word, that it was always that fun little discussion moving across schools. It'd be like, you're from the Shire kind of thing, where it'd be like, don't hold it against me. I can cross a bridge.
I've got an e-tag.
Pack your passport.
I've got the e-tag and I've got my passport ready to go. But I think what it does is it kind of gets you to think greater, bigger systems sort of thinking. Like it moves you away from just thinking, I'm at just this one school, this is all I need to think about. And what it does then, helping leaders, is it helps you make those connections about, okay, if that school's doing that program, would that be feasible at my school?
Yes. Would it work in my context?
Would it work in my context? Would it work with the students we have, the staff that we have? And I think that's one thing that, moving forward, working at my school with our collaborative classroom model, it's something that I've, in my leadership capacity, been thinking about. How could this be rolled out as a potential structure that other schools can tap into? Yes, it won't work in the exact same framework that we've set it up, because of the culture and the work that's been done by the staff to really build it within the structures of how the school flows, with the school, the school community, the students, that all the different working parts of it. But what parts could be feasibly taken on by other schools? And it's discussion I've had with other colleagues I've worked with at previous schools. When I talk about, I love talking about my school, but
you're passionate.
And it is nice when they say, oh, how do you do that? Or that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
How do you go about it? What do you do in this situation? That it's nice to then have those debrief, reflective conversations with other colleagues, because then you're getting them to then think about, oh, okay, that sounds really cool. How could that work in my setting? Like, what could I take, or what could I start with first?
Yeah.
With those small stepping stones, because it's not a quick fix, change overnight.
Yeah.
It is something that's been worked on well before I even got to my current school. The groundwork was being laid before then, the formal structures of what we see now is in place. And it is about getting everyone on board and making it a collective agenda rather than just a one-man show.
I think that really adds to, like, talking about sharing with your colleagues who are at other schools, etc. That really adds to the power in the network, because you're able to sort of share what's going on in your context and adapt potentially. They'll be able to take that and run with that in their own context. And I think that's a really powerful thing, because there's over 2,200 schools within our system. And if we don't share these wonderful things that are working for our students, we want to uplift all students across the system. So I know that there are so many networks available through the Department of Education, for example, like your statewide staff rooms. There are lots of groups that you can join to be able to be supported and facilitated, whether it be literacy or numeracy or special and inclusive education. Is there anything you've been a part of within the department that, you've had a great experience with, or that you would sort of recommend specifically to our beginning or early career teachers?
I think, as you said, now sort of in that space of teams and that like joining some of those state groups, I think have been really helpful in connecting with colleagues from other networks and other schools, especially for me. A few of the support unit groups, just having that quick little chat, not that we, bombard each other with too much information all the time, but it's nice to know you have that space that you can kind of go to and be like, hey, I've got this question. And, hopefully a colleague that maybe had a similar situation or maybe able to think of it from a different perspective can then kind of help support you in finding the answer that you're after. So I think, connecting with those groups and networks, even through that space, just online, I think is a really powerful tool for early career teachers. And I think also, putting your hand up for some of those, extra little jobs that might seem a little bit daunting to begin with, but I think it's an opportunity where you can build your own skills. You can then connect with other schools, individuals that might be in the, same level of teaching as you, or maybe a little bit before or after, but gives you that kind of opportunity to continue to grow your connections across the department as well, which I think is just really powerful, again, to just build that collective, that it's not one school.
Have there been any sort of co-curricular opportunities that have, you've taken a shining to and decided to take the leap and go into maybe fulfill something else in your professional cup, another area that you wanted to upskill in?
Yeah, totally. So I've been involved with Film By for quite some time. I think close to 10 years.
Wow.
So sort of when it started off on the ground in my first one of my first schools that I worked in, and then to see where it's come now to being across the state. It's film orientated, encourages students and teachers to work together to collaboratively create a story, tell a story in a visual form, and what it does is it knocks down those barriers and those walls that any student can be involved. I make films every year with my class. Last year we did a news report on art history and had students dress up and act as famous artists. One of them being Andy Warhol. We had and a couple of others that we learnt about them in the classroom, studied them, talked about them, kind of dabbled in a little bit of their recreating their artworks, and then the students got to dress up like them, put it together, and actually got screened at Event Cinemas at our big showcase festival.
They roll out a red carpet.
Yep, we have the red carpet.
Yeah.
We encourage to come dressed as movie stars.
Yeah.
So I currently support Film by the City, which covers all of the inner west city, North Sydney, eastern suburbs. We've kind of grown quite a lot and joined in with that eastern suburbs area to kind of
Yeah.
bring it all together. And I previously worked on Film by the Sea
Yeah,
in
nice.
Down in the Shire.
I'm familiar.
So yeah, and I think it's just a great thing. And for me, it gets me out of the strict special education support unit classroom brain of where I operate most of my time. And it allows me to, as you said, fulfill my cup in being creative.
It's an additional creative outlet. You're already talking about how creative you are in the classroom, navigating curriculum. It's an additional one on top.
Yeah, and it's something that I suppose for the parents of the students that I work with, something that they absolutely never would fathom is their child being on a cinema screen at a local cinema, being screened and shown to hundreds of people, just brings them great joy as well. And the kids absolutely love seeing themselves just in general. A little bit, but the fact that they get to be a part of all of that and encouraged to be, I think it's just a really awesome thing. So, look up Film By. Yeah. Check out your nearest festival. I know more are being set up in different areas and networks, just as the need and the interest and the desire becomes apparent. And it's just a really fun way to be creative, have a bit of fun, tell a fun story. Yeah. Yeah.
The doors teaching opens.
Oh, it's phenomenal. And I never thought that I would be a film editor.
Yeah, you're
the
a teacher,
things I do now.
Editor,
a star.
Yeah,
it does ruin like HSC English, like film studies sometimes, where you then start picking apart movies when you go to see them. You're like, oh, that's a nice camera angle. Oh, I liked what they did there over the shot. So it gets
Don't
you
go
really
watch
thinking.
Nosferatu, pick that one apart.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing.
I wanted to kind of track back to talking about the collaborative classrooms initiative that your school, or I suppose foundation that your school has set. That's sort of been a tried and tested strategy that has worked for you and your school context. Do you have any other sort of go-to strategies for the inclusive education classroom that potentially first timers who may not have jumped into that context before might be able to gain some advice from? Is there like one of your go-to strategies, or even just the way that you build your classroom environment? I'd love to hear what that looks like.
I suppose the biggest thing is always, really, really getting to know the individual.
Yeah.
Knowing where their interests are, what they like, what they don't like, building that connection that they know you're their go-to person.
One step at a time. You're at the start of your career,
Yeah.
It's all about honing your practice and I think the most important thing is actually getting to know your students and who they are.
Oh, relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That trumps everything for me. I think it's a big part of my ethos because you're with those little people for, a year possibly of your life, maybe longer if you go through and follow them on into, further grades. I'm like, we're a little team in here. So we're going to get to know each other and we're going to figure it out together.
No, totally. I think that, springing off from that in regards to support unit settings as well, there are times where you will have the same students for quite a number of years. And I think, as you said, relationships, like really building that positive, open communication with families, I think is a really powerful thing to remember as well, that to ensure that you're working together, I think is something that
well, it will stand the testament of time.
Yeah, it'll help you get to know the students that much better.
Yeah.
And it'll also help the parents on their journey as well, where they're at in regards to their child's needs and journey, to then help support them as well. So it is very much a team effort.
Absolutely.
I think setting up those safe, calm spaces in your classroom is really powerful within mainstream context, and you do see that happening a lot more, which I think is nice, because then any student, and it's not an exclusive club, but it's, a space for any student in the classroom that might be feling a little bit overwhelmed, or a little bit uncertain.
Yeah, we're all learning to regulate our emotions together.
Exactly.
Even Miss sometimes. Sometimes Miss needs to sit in the calm corner. That's okay.
Absolutely. There's been times where I have had to as well. I think even, if a school has the capacity, one thing that I'm kind of proud of moving to my current school is helping set up a new sensory room.
Nice.
So, working with the P&C, working with the parents to kind of fit out a really nice space where we now currently have students from mainstream that if they need a moment to regulate or a bit of, couple of
That's
minutes
really
away
good.
from
Yeah.
from their classroom because it's just getting a little bit too much. We'll have students with their support staff come and be like, "Hey, can we have 10 minutes in there?" I'm like, "Go for it." They put the timer on. Students jump in on the trampoline,
Yeah.
hop into the ball pit,
Yeah.
sink to the bottom,
Nice.
jump on the crash mats, that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
just to really help them feel calmer and safer within themselves, so that they can then go back to their classroom and access the learning in a much calmer, more appropriate manner.
I'd be voting for my staff meeting in there, to be quite honest with
Hey,
you.
look, if the room was big enough, we probably could do that.
Well, it sounds like you were, a born teacher, and I've really enjoyed this
Agreed.
conversation. I've learned a lot. I think for me, like I had a stint as an SLSO in a support unit and an SSP, and I think that was really eye-opening for me. But that was a snippet of my career, my journey. So I really love talking to people like you. You mean, we've mentioned it a few times now. We want everyone to know 15 years. And you come with so much knowledge and expertise. So thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you. And as I said, like I think it's a powerful thing that everyone should, at any point in their career,
Yes.
Give it a go. Like you don't know what you're missing out on, really.
Thank you so much for joining us on the couch, John. It's been honestly phenomenal to hear about your journey and your story. And thank you so much for sharing and giving up some time to join us.
No, thank you for having me.
We
It's been a
greatly
lot of fun.
appreciate it. Until next time, we will see you back on the couch. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who potentially is interested in special or inclusive education, wanting to hear more, or someone who's thinking of taking the leap and joining our special and inclusive educators in our system. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Teach New South Wales podcast, where we explore the dynamic world of education. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to be notified when new episodes become available. You can find us on social media via our handle @Teach New South Wales. Until next time, keep learning, keep teaching, and keep making a difference. This podcast is produced by the Teach New South Wales team from the New South Wales Department of Education.